I'm a successful dentist, and my wife is a renowned psychologist. We were the perfect power couple until I caught her moaning another man's name in her office after hours. I was ready to destroy both their careers with one email. But then her lover revealed a truth that made me realize I was the real monster in this marriage. What I discovered that night shattered our perfect life and made me question every moment of our 7-year marriage. I've been staring at my computer screen for hours now, trying to figure out how to start this story. It's strange how life can seem so perfect one day and completely fall apart the next. Looking back, I keep wondering if there were signs I missed, moments where I could have changed course. But hindsight is a real pain in the neck, isn't it? I'm Dr. Nathan Parker, though most of my patients just call me Dr. Nate. I run a successful dental practice in downtown Chicago, the kind with a view of Lake Michigan that makes the mortgage worth every penny. My wife Rachel and I met during a medical conference in Boston 7 years ago. She was giving a talk about anxiety and healthcare professionals, and I was there learning about dental anxiety management. Talk about a match made in heaven, right? Rachel has her own private psychology practice now, just a few blocks from my office. We used to joke about being the healing couple. I fix smiles while she fixed minds. We had this perfect routine. Morning runs along the lake, coffee at our favorite spot in Lincoln Park, weekend brunches with our friends Mark and Jennifer. The kind of life that looks great on Instagram, you know? Our social circle was full of other professionals, doctors, lawyers, therapists. We hosted dinner parties where conversations would bounce between medical breakthroughs and psychological theories. Rachel would always light up during these discussions, especially when talking about her complex cases, keeping everything confidential, of course. I loved watching her in those moments, so passionate, so alive. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Here I was, 35 years old, with a thriving practice, a beautiful wife who understood the demands of a medical career, and a life that seemed picture-perfect. We even had our 5-year plan all mapped out. Expand my practice, maybe start a family, buy that vacation house in Michigan we'd been eyeing. The American dream, served with a side of dental floss and therapy sessions. But lately something had been off. The conversations started getting shorter, the dinners less frequent. Rachel began spending more time at her office, saying she had emergency sessions with clients. I didn't think much of it at first. We both had demanding careers, after all. But there was this growing distance, little moments where we used to connect, but now just pass like ships in the night. Maybe it started when Dr. James Carter joined her practice 6 months ago. He was fresh out of his residency at Johns Hopkins, all charm and new theories about cognitive behavioral therapy. Rachel started staying later at the office, collaborating on cases with him. She'd come home excited about their discussions, talking about new approaches to trauma therapy. I tried to be supportive, even though something in my gut kept nagging at me. The real trouble began last Tuesday. We had our usual dinner with Mark and Jennifer, but something was different. Rachel seemed distant, checking her phone more often than usual. When I asked about it later, she snapped at me, said I was being controlling, that I didn't understand the demands of her profession. Me, not understanding? I deal with anxious patients all day, but I didn't say that. Instead, I let it slide like I'd been letting a lot of things slide lately. I never thought I'd be writing this kind of story. 7 years of marriage, built on understanding and respect for each other's careers. And now, well, now I'm not sure what we're building anymore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how everything fell apart, you need to know what happened next. And trust me, what happened next changed everything. I always prided myself on being level-headed. You have to be when you're a dentist. Keeping your cool while dealing with anxious patients comes with the territory. But that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. That gut-wrenching feeling that something was about to hit the fan. It started as a regular Thursday evening. I had just finished with my last patient, a root canal that went smooth as butter, and was catching up on some paperwork. Rachel usually texted when she was working late, but I hadn't heard from her all day. No biggie, I thought. She was probably caught up with clients. Around 7:30, I decided to surprise her with dinner. I picked up some Thai food from that place she loves on Michigan Avenue and headed to her office. The lights were still on, and I could see shadows moving behind the frosted glass. As I was about to knock, I heard laughter, Rachel's laugh, the kind I hadn't heard at home in weeks, and a male voice that had to be Dr. Carter's. I stood there, takeout bags getting heavy in my hands, feeling like a complete idiot. Through the glass, I could see their silhouettes sitting close together, heads bent over what I assumed were patient files. Everything looked professional, but something about it made my stomach turn. I was about to knock when I heard Rachel say, "James, you're a lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do without you." Instead of knocking, I turned around and left. The Thai food ended up in my office trash can. I felt like a jealous teenager, and I hated it. Rachel was a professional, Dr. Carter was a colleague, and I was letting my imagination run wild. But man, was I barking up the wrong tree. When Rachel finally came home around 9:30, she barely acknowledged me. She kicked off her heels, grabbed a glass of wine, and started telling me about this breakthrough she and James had with a difficult case. James this, James that. I sat there, nodding like a bobblehead, while she went on about his brilliant insights and innovative approaches. "You should see how he handles resistant patients," she said, eyes lighting up. "It's like he can read their minds." We lost track of time working on this new therapy approach. I try to keep my cool. "Must be nice having such a dedicated colleague," I said, aiming for casual but probably missing by a mile. She gave me this look, half annoyed, half something else I couldn't quite read. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, but we both knew it wasn't nothing. The tension in the room could have choked a horse. Rachel set down her wine glass a little too hard. "You know what, Nate? Green isn't your color. James is a colleague, and I'm not going to apologize for having a productive working relationship." That's when I should have kept my mouth shut. But you know how it goes. Sometimes your mouth starts writing checks your brain can't cash. Productive? Is that what we're calling it now? The look she gave me could have frozen Lake Michigan. "I can't believe you're doing this. You're acting like some insecure teenager. I thought you were different from my other clients' husbands, the ones who can't handle their wives having male colleagues." That stung. Rachel knew exactly where to hit to make it hurt. But what happened next? Well, that's when things really went south. I'd love to say I handled things like a mature adult that night, that I stayed calm and rational, like I do with my anxious patients. But sometimes life throws you a curveball that even years of professional training can't prepare you for. Our argument escalated faster than a teenager's cavity without fluoride. Rachel kept defending her relationship with James, saying I was being ridiculous and controlling. The more she defended him, the more my blood boiled. It was like watching someone perform a root canal on my marriage without anesthesia. "You're being completely irrational," Rachel said, pacing our kitchen like it was her therapy office. "James and I are professionals. We're doing important work. Just because you can't understand the complexity of psychological treatment." That's when I lost it. "Oh, I understand plenty. I understand how you light up when you talk about him. How you're never home anymore. How every conversation somehow circles back to James this and James that. Tell me, Dr. Parker, how would you diagnose that?" She stopped pacing and looked at me like I was one of her patients having a breakdown. "You want to go there? Fine. Let's talk about how you're projecting your own insecurities onto my professional relationship." Classic defensive mechanism. Did you know that's exactly what James and I were discussing in our last? There it is again. I threw my hands up. Even in the middle of an argument about him, you can't help bringing up his brilliant insights. "What's next? Are you going to suggest we need couples therapy with him?" Rachel's face turned red. "You know what? This is exactly why I prefer spending time at the office. At least there, I'm treated like a professional, not some teenager sneaking around behind daddy's back." I should have stopped. Should have taken a breath. Should have remembered all those conflict resolution techniques we learned about in management seminars. Instead, I said something I knew would hurt. "Well, if you prefer the office so much, maybe you should just move your pillow there. I'm sure James wouldn't mind sharing his couch." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel's face went through a series of emotions: shock, hurt, anger, before settling on something cold and clinical. When she finally spoke, her voice was eerily calm, like she was addressing a difficult patient. "You want to know the truth, Nathan? The real reason I've been spending so much time at the office." She took a step toward me, her eyes blazing. "Because James actually respects me as a professional. He doesn't see me as just the wife. He challenges me intellectually, pushes me to be better." When was the last time you asked me about my work without turning it into some kind of interrogation? I stood there, my mouth suddenly dry. "That's not fair. No, what's not fair is you reducing my professional achievements to some sort of cheap affair story. You know what James said to me today? He said I was wasting my potential in private practice, that I should be running a major clinic or teaching at a university. When was the last time you encouraged me to aim higher? The words hit me like a physical blow. But what she said next, that's when everything really fell apart. I've dealt with plenty of painful situations in my career, abscessed teeth, failed root canals, you name it. But nothing prepared me for what Rachel said next. Her words cut deeper than any dental instrument ever could. You want to know something, Nathan? James kissed me last week in his office. The world stopped. My ears started ringing like I'd been standing next to a dental drill for hours. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself, my knuckles turning white. It didn't mean anything, she continued, her therapist voice slipping into place. I pulled away immediately. But for a moment, I felt something I haven't felt with you in years. Appreciated, understood, valued for my mind, not just as your successful wife who fixes other people's problems. I let out a laugh that sounded foreign even to my own ears. Valued? Is that what we're calling emotional affairs these days? Do your therapy books have a chapter on that? See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Rachel's professional composure cracked. You're not even asking why it happened. You're not asking what's missing in our marriage. You're just standing there, making snide remarks like this is another dinner party story. I felt something inside me snap. Years of maintaining a calm, professional demeanor in front of patients went out the window. Okay, Dr. Parker, let's analyze this. My wife is spending late nights with her colleague, coming home gushing about his brilliant insights, and now tells me he kissed her. But sure, let's discuss what's missing in our marriage. Should I schedule an appointment with your office for that conversation? Rachel flinched like I'd slapped her. You're being cruel. I'm being cruel? That's rich coming from someone who just dropped a bombshell about another man kissing her, and then tried to make it a teaching moment about our marriage. She grabbed her phone from the counter, hands shaking. I'm calling Mark and Jennifer. I can't stay here tonight. Running away to analyze this with more colleagues? The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Rachel paused at the kitchen doorway, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Nathan. I'm giving us both space before we say things we can't take back. Isn't that what you tell your patients when a procedure goes wrong? Sometimes you need to step back and assess the damage. The professional reference felt like a slap in the face. As she walked upstairs to pack a bag, I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by all the trappings of our successful life. The expensive coffee maker we bought last Christmas, the framed article about Chicago's top medical professionals featuring both our practices, the family photos from vacations we'd squeeze in between our busy schedules. I pulled out my phone, staring at the last text she'd sent me this morning. Working late again, don't wait up. How many of those late nights were spent with James? How many moments of professional collaboration had crossed lines I didn't even know existed? The sound of her suitcase wheels on our hardwood floors snapped me back to reality. She came back downstairs, overnight bag in hand, looking more like one of her patients leaving a difficult session than my wife of 7 years. I'll be at Mark and Jennifer's, she said, not meeting my eyes. I think we both need time to process this. As she reached for the door, I found myself saying something I never thought I'd say to her. But that moment, those words, that's when everything truly crumbled. The next few days were like working on a patient with a severe case of lockjaw. No matter what I did, nothing would open up. Rachel didn't come home that night, or the next, or the one after that. Mark called to tell me she was staying in their guest room, but beyond that, radio silence. I threw myself into work, scheduling more patients than usual, staying late at the office. Anything to avoid going home to our empty house. My dental assistant, Sarah, noticed something was off but was kind enough not to ask. I caught her rearranging my schedule to give me longer breaks between patients, the kind of thoughtfulness that made me realize how much my professional mask was slipping. One morning, I had a young patient, maybe 7 or 8, ask me why I looked so sad. Kids have this way of seeing right through you, don't they? I managed to smile and told her I was just tired, but it hit me hard. Here I was, a successful dentist in downtown Chicago, and I couldn't even convince a child that I was okay. I tried reaching out to Rachel several times. Professional emails about shared patients, text messages about bills that needed paying, even a voicemail about her favorite plant that needed watering. anything to get some kind of response. But she maintained her distance with the precision of a skilled surgeon removing a troubled tooth. The few times she did reply, her messages were clinical, detached. I've transferred the shared patients to Dr. Miller. The bills are set to autopay. Jennifer will stop by to water the plants. Each response carefully crafted to require no further discussion. 1 week into this silence, I decided to drive by her office. It was late, around 8 p.m., and I told myself I was just checking if she was working late again. The lights were on, and through the window, I could see her and James sitting in her office. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, just sitting across from each other, talking. But the way she was gesturing animatedly, the slight smile on her face, it was like watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. I sat in my car for almost an hour, remembering all the times she used to look at me that way. How we'd stay up late discussing difficult cases, sharing our experiences, supporting each other's dreams. When did we stop doing that? When did our professional discussions turn into quick updates between meetings and hasty goodnight kisses? That night, I went home and did something I hadn't done since dental school. I opened a bottle of whiskey and started going through our photos on my phone. There we were at last year's medical conference in Boston, both presenting papers. Rachel beaming with pride as I introduced her as my wife and fellow healthcare professional. Pictures from dinner parties, vacation snapshots, casual selfies at Chicago landmarks. In every image, we looked so happy, so connected. I found myself examining each photo like an X-ray, looking for signs of decay in our relationship. Were her smiles already becoming forced? Was I already starting to look distracted? When did the rot begin to set in? The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a headache and several missed calls from my office. As I rushed to get ready for my first patient, I noticed something that made my heart stop. Rachel had been by the house while I was asleep. Her favorite coffee mug was missing from the dish rack, along with a few other items I hadn't even noticed were important to her. She'd been there, in our house, while I was passed out on the couch. She'd moved around our space like a ghost, collecting pieces of her life, and I hadn't even known. But what really broke me wasn't what she took, it was what she left behind. What Rachel left behind was her wedding ring, placed carefully next to our framed marriage certificate in the home office. The same office where we used to spend Sunday mornings, her reviewing patient files while I caught up on dental journals. I picked up the ring, remembering how proud I'd been when I bought it. 3 carats, princess cut, perfect for my professional wife, the jeweler had said. Now it felt cold and heavy in my palm. Work became my sanctuary, but even there, I couldn't escape. Every married patient seemed to want to talk about their relationship during procedures. Mrs. Johnson, getting her regular cleaning, told me about her daughter's divorce. Mr. Peterson, in for a filling, shared how he and his wife recovered from a rough patch. I nodded and smiled behind my mask, feeling like a fraud. One afternoon, between patients, I found myself Googling James Carter. His professional profile was impressive. Harvard Medical School, residency at Johns Hopkins, numerous published papers. The kind of colleague any therapist would be excited to work with. I stared at his profile picture, trying to see what Rachel saw. The final straw came during a dental society dinner. Dr. Sarah Chun, a periodontist who shared an office building with Rachel, approached me with news that made my stomach turn. "Nathan, I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, her voice careful. Rachel submitted her paperwork to move her practice to the medical center. She'll be working more closely with the psychiatric department. With Dr. Carter's team, I maintained my professional smile, the same one I use when telling patients they need extensive work done. "That's news to me," I said, taking a sip of water to hide my trembling hands. "They're planning to develop a comprehensive anxiety treatment program," she continued. "It's quite innovative, actually." Driving home, I passed by Rachel's office building. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of her gesturing enthusiastically, probably explaining one of her treatment theories. James stood next to her, nodding along, his hand occasionally touching her shoulder. At home, I opened our last family photo, taken at the Christmas party 3 months ago. We looked happy, but now I could see what I'd missed. The slight distance between us, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, how my hand rested formally on her shoulder instead of holding her close. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. But what it said, that's when I realized how far we'd really drifted. Rachel's text message glowed on my screen. I've filed for divorce. James helped me find a good lawyer. The papers will be delivered to your office tomorrow. I thought you should hear it from me first. I read the message 5 times, each word hitting harder than the last. James helped her. Of course he did. I wondered how long they'd been planning this, how many of their late-night sessions have been spent discussing more than just patient cases. My first instinct was to call Mark and Jennifer, but I stopped myself. How many of our dinner conversations had been about their work helping couples through rough patches? Had Rachel been taking mental notes all along, preparing for this moment? I poured myself a drink and opened my laptop. There was in my email a meeting request from Rachel's lawyer for next week. The subject line read, "Dissolution of marriage. Initial consultation." Just another appointment in my calendar, like a root canal or a crown fitting. My phone started buzzing with messages from colleagues. Word travels fast in medical circles. Dr. Chen sent a carefully worded text expressing her support. 2 other dentists from the society dinner reached out. Even my dental supply representative sent a message asking if I needed to talk. I found myself walking through our house, seeing it through new eyes. The artwork we'd collected from medical charity auctions. The designer furniture Rachel had insisted would impress our professional friends. The home office with 2 desks, carefully arranged so we could work together while maintaining our own space. Everything looked like a perfectly curated display of successful married life. But now I could see the cracks. The separate schedules on our shared calendar. The growing collection of self-help books on Rachel's bookshelf. The way our photos had become more formal, less intimate over the years. I pulled up our practice's website. Rachel was still listed under my emergency contacts. My bio still mentioned her as my wife. All these little digital threads connecting us would need to be severed, one by one. The worst part wasn't the divorce papers coming. It wasn't even that James had helped her find a lawyer. It was realizing that while I'd been worried about them having an affair, they'd been building something else entirely. A new future where I was just another failed case study in Rachel's collection of relationship analyses. I picked up my phone to reply to her message. But what could I say? Thanks for the professional courtesy of advance notice. Glad James could help. Remember when we used to help other couples through their problems? Instead, I sent the most clinical response I could manage. Acknowledged. I'll have my lawyer review the papers. Her response came quickly. I'm keeping my practice separate from James's department. I hope we can maintain professional courtesy. Professional courtesy. The same thing we preach to our patients about maintaining relationships with their previous healthcare providers. Now we were going to apply it to our marriage. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. Something that would either salvage what was left of us or destroy it completely. I wrote an email to every patient we shared, every colleague who knew us as a couple, every friend in our professional circle. Subject line: the truth about Dr. Rachel Parker's new partnership. My finger hovered over the send button. One click and I'd destroy not just a reputation, but everything we'd built. All the professional courtesy we'd maintained. All the respect we'd earned gone. Inside the email was everything. James's late-night visits to her office, the ongoing emotional affair, how they'd planned her departure while pretending to work on cases. Not technically unethical by medical board standards, but enough to raise eyebrows in our conservative medical community. I sat there, staring at my laptop screen, remembering all the times Rachel had lectured about professional ethics. How many times had she told patients that trust, once broken, was the hardest thing to rebuild? Just as my cursor moved toward the send button, a new email popped up. It was from James Carter. Subject line: about Rachel. Dr. Parker, I know you probably hate me right now, and you have every right to. But before you do anything, you should know the truth. Rachel hasn't been entirely honest with either of us. I opened the email, my hands shaking. As I read, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about the past few months suddenly looked different. James explained how Rachel had been struggling with depression for months. How she'd confided in him initially as a colleague seeking professional advice. How he'd encouraged her to talk to me, to seek proper therapy. The kiss, it had been a mistake, one he regretted immediately. He'd been trying to maintain professional boundaries ever since. She's not leaving you for me, he wrote. She's leaving because she thinks you stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her only as Dr. Rachel Parker, perfect wife and successful therapist. She needs help, but she won't accept it from someone who can't see past her professional facade. I closed my laptop without sending my email. 7 years of marriage, and I'd never noticed my wife was crying out for help. I'd been so focused on maintaining our image of professional success that I'd missed the woman behind the credentials. Standing up, I grabbed my keys. I knew where Rachel would be, not at her office, but at the small park near our first apartment, where she used to go when cases got too heavy. Back when she still shared that part of herself with me. As I drove there, I thought about all the times I'd proudly introduced her as Dr. Parker at medical functions. How I'd bragged about our joint success, our perfect professional partnership. When was the last time I just called her Rachel? When was the last time we'd talked about anything other than work? I parked my car and saw her sitting on our old bench. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable without her professional armor. But what happened next would determine whether we had any chance of saving what was left of us. Rachel looked up as I approached the bench. Her eyes were red, missing their usual professional sparkle. No makeup, no power suit. Just my wife in an old Northwestern sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years. I got an interesting email from James, I said, sitting down but leaving space between us. She tensed. Nathan, why didn't you tell me? My voice cracked. All these years helping others with their mental health, and you couldn't tell your own husband you were struggling? Because Dr. Nathan Parker doesn't do struggling, she said quietly. He does success. Perfect practice, perfect wife, perfect life. Where exactly does depression fit into that picture? The words hit harder than any failed procedure ever had. Is that really how you see me? When was the last time you asked about my day without turning it into a networking opportunity? The last time we talked about feelings instead of patient outcomes. She wiped her eyes. James wasn't an affair. He was the first person who saw me cracking under the pressure of being perfect Dr. Parker. I thought we were living the dream, I said. Top practices, professional power couple. That was your dream, Nathan. I just tried to fit myself into it until I couldn't anymore. She pulled out her phone, showing me her therapy journal app. I've been keeping this for months. Want to know what the recurring theme is? Today, I helped 3 patients process their trauma while pretending I'm not drowning in mine. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The papers are still coming tomorrow. Rachel, please. We can fix this. I'll cut back on patients. We can do couples therapy. See? Even now, you're treating it like a procedure. Diagnose, treat, solve. She stood up. I need to find myself again, Nathan. Not Dr. Parker. Not your wife. Just Rachel. And James is my colleague, nothing more. He helped me see I needed help, but he can't be the one to give it. She touched my shoulder lightly. Neither can you. Not anymore. I watched her walk away, her silhouette blurring through my tears. But just before she reached her car, she turned back. You know what I miss most? That dental student who brought me coffee during my night shifts at the hospital. The one who talked about more than just teeth and success rates. The one who saw Rachel, not Dr. Parker, standing there in the park where we'd once planned our perfect life. I realized something that would change everything. It's been 3 months since that night in the park. The divorce papers came as scheduled, but they're still sitting and signed on my desk. Not because I'm fighting it, but because Rachel and I agreed to try something first. We both took leaves of absence from our practices. Rachel moved in with her sister, while I stayed in our house. But every Wednesday, we meet, not at our offices or any medical building, but at the coffee shop where we first met during our residencies. No talking about patients. No discussing medical journals. No networking or professional development. Just 2 people trying to remember who they were before the titles and successes. Last week, Rachel told me she's been seeing a therapist in another city. Someone who doesn't know us, doesn't care about our professional reputations. She's learning to separate herself from Dr. Parker, she says. I'm proud of her for that, though I'm trying to express it without sounding like I'm evaluating a colleague's progress. I've made changes too. Sold my practice to a larger medical group. I still treat patients, but I'm not in charge anymore. No more 60-hour weeks trying to build an empire. Instead, I'm remembering why I wanted to be a dentist in the first place, to help people, not to collect accolades. Yesterday, we had our weekly coffee. Rachel wore that old Northwestern sweatshirt again, her hair in a messy bun. She told me about a painting class she's taking, something she'd always wanted to try, but never had time for. I shared stories about my new hobby, cooking classes, where I'm absolutely terrible but having fun. You seem different, she said, studying me over a cup. I'm trying to be, I replied. Less Dr. Parker, more Nathan. She nodded, understanding. I miss him sometimes. Nathan, I mean, not the successful dentist, just you. I miss you too. Not Dr. Rachel Parker, just Rachel. We're not back together. Maybe we never will be. But for the first time since everything fell apart, we're seeing each other clearly. No professional filters, no success metrics, no perfect image to maintain. The divorce papers are still there, and they might still get signed. But whether we end up together or apart, we're finally learning who we are beyond our titles. Sometimes you have to lose everything you built to find what you had in the first place. As I write this final update, I'm sitting in that same coffee shop. Rachel just texted. She's running late for our weekly meetup. But this time, her message made me smile. Traffic's awful. But hey, at least I don't have to maintain a professional image anymore. See you soon, Nathan. Just Nathan. Maybe that's all we ever needed to be.